BNC, 100% black and brown host all day. Finally, news that speaks to us.
So, of course, we want to point out what is happening in Ukraine, but also a growing problem as the crisis unfolds. It's the person you're looking at. Black women, think about it, a vice president, a UN ambassador, an Olympic basketball star, all being minimized or ignored in certain media circles. One pundit even blaming the Vice President Kamala Harris for starting the war in Ukraine. It should be pointed out that same pundit often praises Vladmir Putin. Joining us now to talk about it, an all-star panel, some of the brightest names in politics. We have, of course, our D.C. correspondent, Bofta, Yimam, and Atiba Madyun, who is the president and CEO of Party Politics USA. Bofta, I'll begin with you. The vice president is on a diplomatic mission to ensure U.S. allies in Europe should make sure that the war in Ukraine does not expand. Here at home, though, she's being minimized and ridiculed, actually painted as incompetent.
You know, when she was running, this reminds me of how she couldn't do anything right. She was too conservative. She was too liberal. She wasn't black enough. She had enough black in her, right? It's like she couldn't win no matter what she did. Clearly, though, what this is showing us is that the president has an incredible amount of faith in Vice President Kamala Harris to send her overseas on behalf of the administration to send the message, to reaffirm the commitment to NATO, and to also make sure that she's patching up things that may need some work, you know, like the warplanes, and we talked about yesterday, and Poland. And so when she's now in Romania, and I heard her speak earlier, and I thought that she did a good job reaffirming that the alliance is bigger and stronger than ever. And that's what she's there to do, is to send the message. This is perhaps her biggest mission ever. And yet any misstep, any laughter out of turn that maybe was misinterpreted, is completely criticized. It's like folks are waiting for the ball to drop when it comes to Vice President Kamala Harris. They're just waiting for her, especially conservatives, to really do a misstep of any sort in order to hold on to that and then ride it into their messaging into the midterms.
Atiba, a lot of people are going to say, there you go again. But all black professionals know it always begins with the minimization. Listen to the words of Congressman John Garamendi on Brittney Griner's situation. Take a listen.
It's going to be very difficult. Our diplomatic relationships with Russia are non-existent at the moment. Perhaps during the various negotiations that may take place, she might be able to be one of the solutions. I don't know.
Atiba, one of our producers said it best. Imagine that the Russians were holding Michael Phelps. Brittney Griner is not only a WNBA superstar, she's also an American Olympic gold medalist. And yet you're seeing coverage, but it's different coverage than we would see.
So call me incorrect on this, but I'm going to have to put this onus of responsibility first back on the United States for why is even Brittney in Russia playing basketball. And a lot of it is because of wage inequality, because she doesn't have the same opportunity right here at home to be able to make a salary that's comparable to what we see NBA players make. And we've seen this argument as it relates to the women's soccer team. But in terms of where we see, and we talk about the devaluing of Black women, we also have an issue, a serious issue within our own community that I think that we really need to address. Because when Kamala was on the ballot to run for president, there were a lot of Black men who found it difficult and talked about her before she even became the vice presidential candidate. And when she became vice presidential candidate, we saw the same thing. So while we may place the blame on others, I think there's also a lot of blame that we need to also look at internally. The press is going to do, and they're going to say what they want to do. Right here on BNC, I think the Black News Channel, this is the place too that we can also elevate these type of stories and report on the things that are not being talked on about the CNNs and MSNBCs, and not necessarily focus so much on the devaluing, but also talk about the value of having these people in these positions. Because when you go back to the Bush administration with Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice, the world was more prepared to see a Black man as president or a Black person as president, as well as the world was more prepared to see a Black woman as vice president, because they saw these others on a diplomatic level, in these diplomatic positions in terms of Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice. But we do know, because we talk about this a lot, that the devaluing of Black women, of Black men, of all of us is a certain thing But I think it's also up to us to continue to tell our stories and tell it in a way that is unapologetic. And in terms of what the vice president is doing, she's in a key position. So no matter what she does, she's going to be criticized. And so my hope is that she just continues to do what she's doing. We saw her in incredible fashion during those confirmation hearings for Kavanaugh. And we saw her with Cory Booker, and we saw them as being like that moral voice of the Senate. I think that, and I'm happy to see that she's in this position as vice president, because she's also hopefully that last person in the room who's advising the president of the United States on these issues. So there's a lot of things that we don't see, but her value is it's priceless. And we have to continue, I think, to build up and not so much focus on what others are doing, but look at what we are doing and continue to put her forward.
But Bofta, here's the voice that's always in the back of your head as an African American. Do I belong here? The vice president was also dispatched to the southern border and attacked for that. The other way of looking at it is that the president must have a lot of confidence in her, but it does affect us whether we choose to admit it or not, the constant barrage of negative criticism, regardless of who it is. I remember Michelle Obama on the cover of the magazine holding an AK-47. I mean, let's be realistic. Michelle Obama, really?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, I think it's one of those things where Vice President Kamala Harris, being that she's the first in several ways here with the administration, with what we've had in the United States, she is facing, along with what Michelle Obama faced at times, complete racism and sexism. And I want to touch on one thing that Atiba did say related to the Griner situation, and just a quick moment on that, is that she also has another thing with her, is that she is a lesbian. And she is not only a Black woman, but she's a lesbian, part of the LGBTQ. And, you know, do we devalue that as well? Would we put her in a different stratosphere, a different level of concern if it was a husband who was saying, I'm so worried about my wife overseas and our kids? Would we place higher value on that? I think these are questions that we need to ask when we look at the Griner situation and the timing of the arrest, and so many things being a mystery here, and her potentially being used as a token under Putin right now. We just don't know enough about the situation, and we don't have enough people calling for something beyond concern. And so to the extent of, and flip back to Kamala Harris here, but when we talk about Kamala Harris and how she is seen, I think one of the points that we don't talk about enough in society is that Black women can be seen as untrustworthy. Professional Black women can be seen as untrustworthy in very high positions. And it is not only from white counterparts, but as Atiba mentioned, I think that there's much of this at play within the Black community itself. She is someone who has plenty of awards and recognition under her belt. She's had an incredible career, and we still doubt her abilities. And I do think that it gets to her because sometimes she does have, on the world stage even, a tough time recouping after a misstep. Earlier this morning, she spoke for several minutes on the stage in a press conference with Romania's president, and she fumbled a little bit, and you could see that it did hit her confidence a little bit to come back. Nothing major, but it's something that you can see that many conservatives would jump on at the moment that they're able to get on it, Del.
Ginger Rogers once said she did everything that Fred Astaire did backwards and in heels. Ask any African American female, they would say, but you ain't Black.